Teachers of Reddit, what was the best excuse for being late that turned out to be true? One of my organ students told me he was late arriving for his lesson because he got stuck behind a lengthy funeral procession en route to the cemetery. I knew he was telling the truth because I had played the organ for the service earlier that morning and the church was packed. MTV paid me $50 to fill my backpack with cement and carry it around for the day. I accepted that excuse. Student later regretted it, as a replacement backpack and college textbooks far exceeded $50. But he got his moment of fame and I didn't penalize him for his tutty. Got to live a little. But did he have any concrete evidence? A kid missed my first period class one morning, but was in school later that day. When I asked him why he hadn't arrived in time for my course, he said his cow was birthing its calf that morning, so he'd picked being in the barn over English. Made sense to me. His essays weren't going to win any ribbons at the county fair, but his calf could. I was the student. When I was in college I opened my front door to see SWAT teams and D agents outside of my house. The one who looked at me was holding some kind of AR. I went back inside. From what I heard, there was a multiple sting operation that happened around my town and my neighbor's place got raided. I missed half of my classes that day. I was the student. My neighbor had a really social goat, and she figured out how to escape her pen in order to come over and hang out. She escaped and followed me to the bus stop, and when the bus came, she tried to follow me onto it. I couldn't actually get on the bus without her being right behind me, so I had to get off, bring her home, and call my dad to bring me to school. In my hometown, if you walked into anywhere late and said the phrase "sorry, grain train," you were never challenged. It was extremely common for 50+ carriage trains to run through the middle of town. We have the same thing in my hometown, except the bridge was up. That bridge is notorious for not following a schedule and always being up when you're in a hurry. After 9/11, my small town high school received bomb threats every week for 2 months, and they decided to make us attend school on a Saturday. Myself and about 5 others showed up for our classes, and every teacher said something like, "I can't wait for the excuses on Monday." Most of the excuses were something along the lines of family plans or whatnot, but one kid was made read his dad's note aloud to the class because our first period teacher thought it was hilarious. In the most down south accent you can imagine, it went something like, "My son ain't too smart, but he knows you ain't supposed to get punished for someone else being a dumbass. Bought him a 6-pack, so he was drunk. Y'all can F off." I wish we had smartphones to record back then so I could share it. A kid's apartment burned down overnight. He was a little late, but still came. Now that's dedication. Literally today, child missed my first hour class. Notes said car accident on the way to school and would be coming late. Kid comes for second hour, has pictures on his phone of a rollover accident. WTF. Kid, go home, rest, take care of yourself. When I was in college, my psych professor told us that the only excuse for being late was a funeral procession. Any other reason, you wouldn't be allowed to come in. A few weeks into the semester, I was headed from one building to another, which involved crossing the main road. Lo and behold, there was one very long funeral procession going by. I got a short video of it as proof, then stood on the sidewalk to let it go by. Unfortunately, the procession made me 5 minutes late to class. I knocked on the door, and the professor came over to start to tell me off. I showed her the video. Well, I'll be damned. See Monday in. This happened to me as a pupil. A very quiet, unassuming kid in our class came into German with about 5 minutes of the class left. We went to a Catholic school and the teachers were all quite strict and intimidating. Classes were usually silent, especially in junior school. When this boy came into class at the end of the lesson that day, the door flew inwards with such force that the teacher gave an audible gasp. It had been raining heavily outside. His hair was plastered to his forehead. His blazer was dripping and sodden. He had mud caked into his trousers up to his knees, and he was breathing heavily. The teacher exclaimed, "Brendan, what happened?" We all stared up at him in shocked silence. This quiet, unassuming little boy let out a big sigh and just said, "I took a shortcut," and went straight to his seat. That line became iconic in our school 4 years afterwards. That kid had obviously been through a whole coming of age movie and this was the last line before the credits rolled. I like to think he took a seat, smirked slightly, then looked straight at the camera as it faded to black. I had a 6-year-old turn up late to her lesson and blurt out, "Sorry I was late. I had to color in a bunny. Seems fair." Me. My bus hit a bird and the whole windshield was cracked. We had to wait for another bus to pick us up. Told me he got pulled over by the cops for wobbly driving on his bike and they thought he was drunk. Turned out he was just dodging all the slugs on the street. I was one of about 20 kids who were late to school. We showed up at the school office as a group and when questioned why we were late, we said the school bus blew up. They questioned so the engine blew up. The kids know, the whole bus, in flames. It blew up. There was much conference between the teachers, all of them thinking we embellished the story. Next thing you know, one of the admin staff has the news website open. Very obvious image of an entire bus on fire with a bunch of kids in our school uniforms standing in front of it. Our late slip for class reads "School bus blew up." We had an exam in my class and the teacher got a message from a student saying that he was going to be late because his car had a flat tire. The student was known to party. The teacher didn't think it could be true, so as a joke the teacher asked him to bring the tire back. He brought the flat tire back in the middle of the exam. Needless to say, the professor didn't expect that. Student told me he couldn't do the work because he was delivering oil from 3 PM until 11 PM. In middle school, he wasn't lying. Dad has broken his both of shoulders and one clavicle, so his grandma and pregnant mom were switching off driving. Pretty sure he was doing most of it at night, and he was hooking the tanks to the oil. I called all his teachers and had his workload lightened and got permission for him to come in an hour late each day as he was providing the only income for his family of 8. As he was the oldest, tutored him so he could pass 7th grade. I paid cost of oil only 4 years until I moved out of the area. She had to take her sister to school and drive her mom to rehab. She was always late to class because her mom just wanted to sleep in. Problem was if the mom was late or did not go, she would have violated her probation and gone to prison. I never marked her late. If she missed anything important she could come in at lunch or after school to make it up. Not me, but in my class. This was in college. Student turned in work late after not showing up for 2 classes. 2 classes amounted to a full week, so it was noticeable. Professor looked at him and said, "I hope somebody died for you to be this late. Does my dad count?" Honestly, I've always heard you can hear a pin drop and never really thought anything of it. But yeah, you could hear a refine pin cut through the air after that. A way too friendly taxi driver asked me and my sister why we were so quiet. "Did anyone die?" "Yes, we're just on the way back from our dad's funeral." He didn't say a word for the rest of the drive. I was leaving the hospital, having picked up my mom's stuff after she died. The super friendly cab driver asked who I knew there, and I said my mom. He asked me how she was doing, and I told him she was leaving today, for the first time in over a year. Technically true. He was so happy for me. I could have said that she had died. I wasn't in denial or anything. It was her time. Had been for a while. But I knew that if I said that, his whole demeanor would change. And honestly, I liked the genuine happiness. I got to have the last light and fun conversation I would have for weeks after you lose a parent. Everyone walks on eggshells. He tried to set me up with his son, promising he was a good man. I'll never forget that ride. My best friend and I used to roller skate to school, and one day we both forgot to put our shoes in our backpacks. So we skated to the vice principal's office and got to skip first period to go home for shoes. We stopped at Taco Bell on the way back for breakfast, because we figured we were already excused. Not me, but one of my good friends. She went to the Royal Military College of Canada, where they wear their uniforms and there are often tourists visiting the campus. Apparently, it was completely normal to be waylaid by tourists looking to have their photos taken with students in uniform. That all they had to say when they walked in late was tourists, and the professors would let it slide. She always wondered how many family photos she was actually in over her time spent there. I had a teacher who showed up about halfway through the class. Apparently her car had slid. Intense snowstorm the night before. and she had walked the last mile or so. That's dedication to students. My car got hit by lightning. It did. In the school parking lot, her tires were melted to the pavement. She had to go out and deal with a tow truck, call her parents etc. It was pretty dramatic. I'm an English professor, and one year a pretty good student showed up without one of his 2 major term papers. He explained that his safe had been stolen by a contractor who was working on their house. His laptop was in the safe, and that's where his paper was. I genuinely believe him because he'd been a really good student. Then over the next few weeks, he started to show up to class looking very tired. He said that he was on a hunt for the person who stole his safe, and he was spending late nights with his cousin driving around looking for the guy because they knew his van. Now, the student and his cousin were both recently back from tours in Iraq and had seen combat experience. They wanted to find the guy to beat the shit out of him and get the safe back because his wife's wedding ring was in the safe as well as a bunch of cash. He rewrote the paper and turned it in, apologetic that it wasn't up to his usual quality, but he still kept coming to class looking like he hadn't slept. After a little while he came very happy to my office hours, and he reported that he found the guy after a long search that involved breaking into a meth den, shaking people down with baseball bats and even bribing some prostitutes. He said that they found the guy's van at a Taco Bell after getting a tip from a prostitute, and they cornered him and waited for the police to come. I read in the news that he had in fact done a citizen's arrest and stopped the guy at a Taco Bell, and that they ended up calling in the Secret Service because he used the cash that he stole from the safe to buy a bunch of counterfeiting equipment. Secret Service apparently investigates counterfeiting. So the whole investigation happened because this guy, who I dubbed the White Shaft, tracked the scumbag down through the bad side of town late at night to get a wedding ring, some cash, and his research paper back. It all turned out to be true. He got the ring and the laptop back. I gladly accepted his original paper, and it got a much higher grade than the rarite. Best comment of the day. I had like a 90-ish biology teacher in high school who had gotten in a serious car accident, but she shows up to teach the next day with a giant black bruise on her forehead, teaching like nothing major happened. That legendary teacher will never die, and I hope she doesn't, because she always had great stories, and would always tell them with a straight, serious tone in her sweet old lady voice. Lol. She's still teaching to this day, about 3 years after the car incident.